Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are and whatever you're doing. I hope you're having a fantastic day. It's my privilege to bring you today the top most hated bosses in Elden Ring as voted by the community. This poll was live for a week and it had over 10,000 votes in that time. So for everyone that participated, thank you so much for getting involved. It was an absolute pleasure seeing all the results coming in and making this video for you. So we're going to review the top 10 most hated bosses and mini bosses as voted by the community, starting with the 10th worst, and then obviously finishing off with the worst boss in the entire game. And hopefully it'll be as interesting for you to watch as it was for me to see the results and put this together. Not only will I put together some tips and tricks for you to hopefully make these bosses a little bit less annoying, but also it'll be super interesting for you to find out if your personal top 10 align with what the community at large think. Let me know if there's any other community votes you would like me to put together. It's been a pleasure making these. For instance, if you want to find out what people's top 10 favorite armor sets are. Actually, now that I'm saying that, that's a really good one. Maybe we do that next. What do you think? Let me know if there's any other things you'd like the community at large to vote on. With that out the way, just very quickly before we jump into number 10, I'd like to say, if you're new to the channel, welcome. I hope you have a lovely time. And for anyone old and new, if you're enjoying the content and you're not already subscribed, please consider doing so because it helps me out tremendously. And thank you. Just before we get into the first boss, I'd like to give a shout out to this amazing community who very kindly helped me grab a bit of the footage that I was missing for this video. During my first few playthroughs of Elden Ring, I'd actually given up doing YouTube and I wasn't planning on making any content for this channel. So I missed recording quite a few of the late game bosses. I will obviously eventually have that footage as we get there again on our current playthroughs, but there is two bosses during this video that I didn't have any footage for, and I wanted to get this out to you as quickly as possible. I reached out to the community and had loads of you very kindly offer to share your footage with me. So I'd like to give a huge shout out to both Frog Slayer and Too Big to Fail, as I have used the footage from both of their channels for bosses that will be coming up later in the video. I won't spoil exactly which bosses yet, but I will ask David to kindly put it on the screen as we get to that boss, and also I'll link it down in the description, so please make sure you go over and check them out and give them all the love in the world for helping make this video possible. Now, without further ado, let's go into the 10th most hated boss in the game, the Putrid Crystallian Trio. I'm so surprised this boss wasn't higher up on the list. They gave me a real hard time, and I personally think they are definitely one of the most difficult bosses in the game and definitely worthy of being in the top 10. They have resistance in every single damage type in the game. 10% absorption for physical standard and physical strike, and then 35% for slashing and thrust, with a 40% absorption resistance for every single type of elemental damage. So that's magic, fire, lightning, and holy. They're also completely immune to bleed and death blight, and practically immune to poison, scarlet rot, and frostbite. So that means the only way to deal any decent amount of damage to these guys is by using strike weapons, which is what Elden Ring refers to blunt weapons as. So that's primarily hammers, warhammers, and most colossal weapons. Honestly, apart from that, and getting good at dodging their attacks, that's the only real tactic I have for you. With the duo fights and the solo fight against Crystallians, strike weapons can shatter them quickly enough. You should be fine by yourself, but I did end up summoning my Spirit Ashes for the purposes of this video because they are incredibly hard to take out 3 of them by yourself. With that knowledge in your arsenal, good luck facing this boss. Now we'll move on to number 9, the Elden Beast. Where to start with this one? It's the true form of the Elden Ring, and the last boss of the game Elden Ring. Of course, it was going to be on this list. And it's a toughie, no matter how well prepared you are. And there's not really much I can do for you here in regards to taking this bad boy out. He's massive. His attacks are insane. His health pool is even bigger. He is a monster. And you have to fight him directly after defeating Radagon of the Golden Order, which is a son of a bitch just by himself. The few biggest tips I can give you for the Elden Beast are upping your survivability and upping your stamina as much as possible, because this is a long fight and you're not going to be able to just burst him to death with crazy amounts of damage unless you have got a very powerful, very over leveled, perfectly min-max build. He has crazy high absorption for every element, with 40 in magic, fire and lightning, and nearly immune 80% damage reduction to holy. He is also immune to every single status effect, and he's got a 10% absorption for all physical damage. so you're definitely going to need a physical weapon with no element on it if you want to deal good damage to him. It's also advised to go in with quite a lot of holy resistance, such as the Halleck Drake Talisman +2, or using an item or a spell like the Lord's Divine Fortification or the Holy Proof Dried Liver. Apart from that, you really just need to learn the Elden Beast's attacks and attack patterns, and do your best to avoid all of its absolutely devastating attacks. The Mimic Tiarash is fantastic, especially if you can save it for the Elden Beast and try and solo Radagon, and player summons are just going to make this fight even harder because they're going to double the Elden Beast's already gigantic health pool. Now that you know how to survive a lot longer and what weapons to use and what weapons not to use, all I can say is good luck. The Bell-Bearing Hunters. The footage I'm showing you is from the one that you'll encounter in the Lanedale outskirts. However, I imagine the one most people are having trouble with is the one in Caelid, specifically in Dragonbarrow. These guys really are total bullshit. Every single one of their attacks can easily take out half your health. They've got insanely long combos with huge reach, both in terms of distance and the arc at which they swing their sword. If you can learn to roll through the 4/ combo that they do, which is their most common attack, then they're not quite as intimidating. Your best bet with these guys is pierce damage, lightning damage, and poison or scarlet rot. For all other types of damage, they've got a resistance of 40 for magic, fire, and holy. He has crazy high absorption for every element, but their resistance to lightning is only 20%, and their resistance to thrust is actually 10%. So pierce weapons, thrust damage, they are your best bet. They're immune to death and very nearly immune to bleed and frost. However, poison and scarlet rot are quite effective. The one last tip I can give you for these guys is that all of their attacks actually deal 100% physical damage, despite the fact that the levitating red glowing sword looks quite magical. It is in fact 100% pure physical, so a shield with 100% physical resist will completely block all of his attacks. Hopefully that will make these guys just a little bit easier, and good luck. Now we'll move into number 7, the Ulcerated Tree Spirit. Ulcerated tree spirits. There is a lot of them, and they are massive, so they're very intimidating. And they definitely have the move set to back it up. These guys are erratic, and because of their size, it's so hard to telegraph their attacks, and even harder to get out the way. So my biggest advice is massive damage as quick as you can to try and keep them stunned for a large portion of the fight. As for their resistances, i.e. status effects, they are immune to death and sleep. They're also nearly immune to poison, scarlet rot, and bleed. That leaves you with frost. They're quite susceptible to frostbite. And then looking at their absorptions, the only element they're particularly resistant to is holy. They have a minor resistance to magic and lightning at 20%. All 4 of their physical resistances are 0, and they actually take 20% increased damage from fire. So fire and frost are the 2 best ways to take these guys down. Most of them can be cheesed to an extent as well, apart from the one in the Fringe Folk Hero's grave right at the start of the game. He is a son of a bitch. Once you learn to roll through its attacks, and you're exploiting its weaknesses to get it staggered and do big damage to it, you should be absolutely fine. Practice makes perfect with this guy. Now we'll move on to number 6, the Valiant Gargoyle Duo. You will most likely have encountered the giant stone gargoyles at multiple points throughout your playthrough. They're not an uncommon boss or mini-boss, obviously with the most powerful of the bunch being the Blackblade Kindred. However, this is the one and only time you'll fight 2 of them at once, and they are absolute buggers. Firstly, we'll take a quick look at their resistances. They're immune to everything. Great. Glad we did that. And then when it comes to the damage absorption, they have decent resistance for pretty much everything. The 2 types of damage you want to try and take out these guys, as with most stone enemies, striking or standard. Preferably striking, as that is the only damage in the game where they have 0 damage absorption. So as we covered previously, big hammers, big maces, colossal weapons, this is going to be the best way for you to tackle these guys. And as there's 2 of them, don't feel any shame summoning your Spirit Ashes for this fight. 2 on 2, it's only fair, right? Be very cautious for the duo variant in the Shifra Aqueduct, as they can also spew poison, so some kind of poison resistance or an item to reduce the build-up is advised. Apart from that, the other piece of advice I'd give is to take the first part of the fight very cautiously, learning the attacks, taking next to no damage if you can, and as soon as you get that first gargoyle to half health, just wail on it, do as much damage as possible and take him out, because at 50% the other one will start spawning in. So the quicker you can get one down, the quicker it goes back to a one boss fight again.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Future Dom here, just to give you an extremely quick channel update. We are rebranding. Shortly after this video goes live, the Domtastic Gaming channel will become Dom's Round Table, and I wanted to address it here so people don't worry or wonder, where the hell's Domtastic gone? There's a lot of reasons why Domtastic unfortunately doesn't fit the channel very well. I won't waffle on about that here though. If you're interested, you can read the full reason for the change on the post in my YouTube community tab from Wednesday the 8th of June 2022. But I'm so excited to move forward as Dom and the Knights of the Round Table, and with that being said, subscribers will now be referred to as squires, and members of course will be knights. So if you would like to become a knight of Dom's Round Table, or even just leave your favourite Elden Ring content creator a lovely little generous donation in the form of a super thanks, it would be tremendously appreciated, and I would be forever indebted to you, you kind, lovely, gorgeous, charming, wonderful person. Thank you so much for listening. This is a scary step for a channel because a rebrand could inevitably come with a drop in views when people suddenly think that Domtastic has disappeared. So please share this news and make sure that everyone is aware of Dom's Roundtable. Now let's see who's at number 5. Deathrite Bird. There's a couple of these guys in the game. The one in Liurnia I didn't have much problem with. As you'll know if you've seen the video, the one in Collated I had lots of problems with and ended up trying to cheese him to death from halfway across the map with Loretta's Greatbow. There are also 2 more Deathrite Birds later in the game as well, which we'll come to during our Things You Missed videos, and I'm really looking forward to that. They are immune to every single status effect, bar Scarlet Rot, but it requires so much build up that they may as well be immune to that too. However, when it comes to damage resistances, they're not resistant to all that much. Thrusting weapons they do have a 35% resistance in, and lightning 40. However, from striking weapons, and also from holy elements, they take 40% extra damage. So if you have a striking weapon with a holy affinity, you're going to do insane amounts of damage to these guys. They do all sorts of damage themselves. They do standard and pierce damage when it comes to physical, and they also deal magic damage and inflict frostbite. They're all over the place with their flappy wings and they're flying around. They have lots of far-reaching attacks. They are definitely not an enemy to be underestimated. They will use their most deadly attacks the further away you are. So my best advice is to stay right underneath the bird, just behind it, as very few of its attacks can hit you then. It does have 1 or 2 massive attacks that it will cast around itself, such as the Death Screech, but it's fairly easy telegraphed when you know what you're looking for, so you just need to make sure you run away. Apart from that, as I say, strike weapons with holy damage and staying close to its bum, and eventually you'll be slaying these things like they're nothing. We're finally there. We're finally nearly at the top 3 most hated bosses in Elden Ring as voted by you. But before then, let's go into number 4. The Rune Bear. Coming in at number 4 is the Rune Bears, and I'm going to skip past them because we've already reviewed how to tackle these guys in the top 10 most hated enemies. There are 2 Rune Bear bosses in the game. One of them is the main boss of Earthbore Cave in the Weeping Peninsula, and the other one can be fought as a mini-boss right at the entrance of Dragon Barrow Cave in Collated. As I say, we cover these guys in full as part of the top 10 most hated enemies, so all I'll say here is fire damage and slashing are their biggest weaknesses, so exploit that. And just stay on their arse, just like with the Deathrite Birds, and they shouldn't give you too much trouble. Now finally, we will move into the top 3 most hated bosses as voted by 10,000 members of the Elden Ring community. And coming in at number 3, the Crucible Knights. Not all Crucible Knights have the same resistances and weaknesses. I'm going to specifically focus on Crucible Knight Ordovis and Crucible Knight Siluria, as they are 2 of the more challenging ones and they have the exact same resistances. So if you can take out these 2, you can deal with the rest of them. Also, Ordovis is part of a duo boss fight, which makes him even tougher. The main tactic that in theory trivializes these guys is parry and riposte. They are some of the easiest enemies in the game to parry. They have huge parry timing windows, and in theory they're very easily parryable, but that doesn't mean you should feel bad if you're not able to parry them. I couldn't get the parry timing down in Elden Ring for weeks, and I gave up trying to parry these guys. I can do it now, but that's not the tactic that I first learned to deal with them, because I couldn't do it. So my biggest tip for you and how I dealt with them in my first playthrough is lightning damage. Whether it be from spells or weapons or consumables, lightning and fire are the only two resistances they have where they're not too resistant. They have 35% or 40% resistance to everything. I'm talking physical and magical. Apart from fire and lightning, where it's only 20%, they're also practically immune to all resistances. You can, in theory, poison them, scarlet rot them, and frostbite them, but the build-up requirement is so high that they may as well be immune. So fire or lightning damage, that's going to be the best way to take them down. You'll finally get the hang of them in phase 1 of their fights, and then suddenly they'll get the aspect moveset. The two main aspect attacks you want to watch out for are their tail swings and their flight. The tail swings are very telegraphed and have super long build up. So once you see it a few times, you shouldn't have any problem just rolling through it. You can always roll through the tail swings. Your iframes are more than enough to get you through the tail swing, and then you're good to go. The flight is actually my favorite attack from these guys because it has a really big cooldown once they land, so you can get in a big follow-up attack. So all you need to do is wait for them to start descending on you, roll through it, and then you can wail on them for a few seconds before they get back up again. Now that you've got a few tools in your arsenal to hopefully better deal with these guys, good luck, and we'll move on to the second most hated boss in the entire game. Drumroll please. Of course, it's Melania. Or as she refers to herself, Melania, Blade of Miquella, Melania, Blade of Miquella, Melania, Blade of Miquella. How many fucking times do you need to hear that voice line? Oh my god. Oh, yes, I'm a bit salty from having died to her one too many times during my first playthrough. I got so fed up of hearing that voice line. She is the epitome of cruel boss design. The biggest tip I can give you is this boss is optional. Optional. Let's go through her resistances and see what we can do here, shall we? There is not a single element, whether it be status effect or attack, where she takes increased damage. However, at least her resistances aren't that high. Holy is not very good against her. Try not to use Holy. She will absorb 40% of that. She'll also absorb 20% of magic and lightning attacks, but 0 when it comes to fire. Fire will deal full damage, so fire is a very good idea. And when it comes to all 4 of the physical damages, standard, slash, strike, and pierce, she only absorbs 10%. So physical weapons with fire damage are going to be pretty good. When it comes to the status effects, the only 2 that are realistically going to apply, and even then this is some pretty big numbers, are frostbite and bleed. You can in theory bleed her or frostbite her, and I have actually seen a few people use the swarm of flies incantation quite effectively to bleed her rapidly. Now that you know her resistances, let's talk about her attacks. I'm not going to go into them totally in depth because this isn't a guide on how to defeat Melania. This is a top 10 most hated bosses video. I'm sure there are plenty of guides out there for Melania. That's exactly what you're looking for. But I'll give you a very brief overview of a few things to look out for. Every single time she manages to deal damage, whether that's to you, to your spirit ashes, or to a summoned player, she'll heal herself. So the less you can get hit, the better. She is parryable, and some of her attacks very easily so, but she can only be riposted once every 3rd parry. So you need to parry her quite a lot before you can get in a super powerful riposte attack. She's also incredibly adept at dodging spells, so even more reason that a melee build is definitely recommended for this fight. And then, just as you thought the fight couldn't get any harder, there's a phase 2, and she will always start phase 2 with her Scarlet Ionia spell. You can roll and then sprint away to avoid this, but it is quite tricky to master to get it consistently. So I'd advise making sure that you go into this boss fight with a huge health pool and you're on full health as you go into phase 2. She'll also be more aggressive and get a few other attacks in phase 2, but apart from Scarlet Ionia, her one other attack that is so lethal is the waterfowl dance. And there's a few different methods for avoiding this consistently, but again, they're gonna take practice. As I say, this isn't a boss guide video, so if you want more specifics, go and check out someone else's video, but essentially, A series of specific forwards and backwards rolls should get you to avoid 99% of the sword slashes that she does as part of her waterfowl dance. Now that we've covered the hell spawn that is Melania, Blade of Mikola, Melania, Blade of Mikola, me, we'll move on to the #1 most hated boss in all of Elden Ring, the Godskin duo. The masochist in me is so happy that these guys are so tough that you have voted them as the worst boss in the game, because of the fact that they are one of only 2 mandatory bosses on this list. There's no getting around it, you're gonna have to fight them. So let's see what we can do to make that a little bit less painful. They have a lot of weaknesses, both in regards to damage and status effects, which is good because they're bloody tough. They have a shared health bar, and when you kill one, they will respawn after a short period of time, and you basically have to kill them both nearly twice to actually fully deplete that bar. Sleep is really your friend here. Both of them are incredibly susceptible to sleep, so you can easily put one of them to sleep for quite a long period of time whilst you focus the other one down. You can also use the pillars around the fight to very good effect to hide from their attacks, heal up, do whatever you need to do, and you'll stay out of reach of most of their attacks. They take the most damage from physical weapons, but they also take nearly full damage from magic and lightning, with fire and holy being their only 2 real resistances. Slashing damage is the best because they will take 10% increased damage from slashing, they take base damage from standard and thrust, and they actually have a 35% resistance from strike. So when you've got yourself a nice powerful slashing weapon, you want to try and put one of them to sleep, summon your spirit ashes, and absolutely wail on the other one as hard and as fast as you can. From there, the fight becomes a lot more manageable as long as you stay aggressive. You can juggle the 2 bosses then, smashing them down really quickly before the other one respawns. Essentially just making this a boss rush where you have to rush down 3 or 4 bosses and then you're done. I know it's a lot easier said than done, but it still makes this seemingly insurmountable fight relatively okay and manageable. And just quickly going back to the sleep, the 4 main ways to put them to sleep are going to be sleep bow and arrows if you use a bow and arrow, sleep pots if you've got enough materials to craft them. You can also craft sporific grease to put on your sword or axe, etc. Or you can use the Sword of Saint Trina, which has sleep build-up as standard. Good luck with the 10 most difficult bosses in the game. Let me know if there's any more votes you'd like me to do in the future. It's really fun putting these together and I really hope it helps you out. Please support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. Please go and subscribe to the second channel as well if you don't mind. Completely free to do so, it'll take you 2 seconds and it helps out so much. Thank you as always for watching. I hope you have an amazing day and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.